Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news and a hectic day in the F1 world as the fiasco finally gets resolved. He will be a McLaren driver for the next 2 years, it does indeed seem, but also Friday practice has concluded in Zandvoort, probably the best Friday this entire season for Mercedes, and given Red Bull's worries so far this weekend, could they actually be on for a win at the home Grand Prix for Max Verstappen? Very much into your thoughts in the comment section below, hit the like button if you enjoy, subscribe if you are new as always, I would greatly appreciate it. Just about to hit 8,000 as well. Let's go, baby. First of all, let's talk Oscar Piastri and the McLaren drama that has finally been resolved. The contract recognition board went through everything. Apparently this cost Alpine like 500 grand in legal fees, so they must have thought they had a case. But as it turned out, they looked at it and said, well, actually, the only valid contract is between McLaren and Piastri, dating, very interestingly, from 4th of July 2022. We'll see that date here being more relevant in a second. But yes, Piastri is entitled to drive for McLaren for the 2023 and 2024 season, so he will be a McLaren driver. Obviously, many questions here about this, having Piastri denied the Alpine seat, going to McLaren instead, and what that means for his reputation, but also the pressures on Piastri, right? He declined a seat at Alpine, he maybe burned those bridges to some extent to go and join McLaren next season, and look, he's going to be facing Lando Norris within his own team. That's a tough gig to have with your first season in a McLaren. That was an absolute nightmare for Riccardo the last couple of seasons, right? But yes, a 2-year deal for Oscar Piastri, a very exciting state of affairs there. And Alpine seem to have kind of acknowledged this, and they say, okay, we acknowledge the decision, and there is now no further action for them to make. So crazy, the last couple of months or so from Alpine, that this is the turn of events that they've had. So an all-time disaster class really from Alpine. But yeah, they will announce their driver lineup in due course. And this just to mention the 4th of July thing, because Riccardo put this on his Instagram and Twitter on the 13th of July, saying he's committed to McLaren to the end of the season, and we talked about this at the time, saying, wow, okay, yeah, he's probably going to stay. As it turned out, McLaren, without Riccardo's knowledge, had already agreed to be getting rid of him about a week before this date, and signed that deal with Piastri, apparently. So, yeah, crazy stuff. Riccardo was asked about this in interviews and said, well, look, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day, he's getting paid like 15 million or whatever to end his contract early, so I doubt he's too frustrated. But Piastri goes onto his social media as well and confirms that yes, it's official, he will indeed join McLaren next season. Quite the spicy driver pairing that is, and well, even spicier arguably is what's going to happen in Alpine, because Ocon plus Gasly is rumoured to be the duo over there. And yeah, just looking back at this tweet, which of course is still up to 78 odd thousand likes from the 2nd of August, when they confirmed their lineup, and then 1 month later to the day, it's been confirmed very much so this wasn't the case at all. So remarkable scenes. But yes, Gasly to Alpine now looks pretty much set in stone. I believe he was asked in an interview and said, like, of course, like, you can always read between the lines here, because he said, yes, I don't have much to say about that for now. I'm like, okay, got you. You said for now, which basically means that more to come on this story about him joining Alpine. So more than likely, that's going to happen as well. I'm sure more to come on these stories over the coming days. Of course, I'll keep you guys updated on. But let's dive into what happened actually on the track today, because it was quite the day for a number of teams, and definitely not one for the Max Verstappen fans in the venue to remember. And honestly, the crowd turnout today was absolutely fantastic, right? They've technically banned flares, albeit, come Saturday and Sunday, I kind of doubt that's actually going to be upheld. 4 teams bringing some updates this weekend, so keep in mind, the Mercedes, the Ferrari, the Red Bull that turn up to this weekend's track is exactly the same that turn up to Spa, with so far very different results. So some changes here to the Alpine, AlphaTauri, Williams and Alfa Romeo respectively, but yes, a difficult day for Red Bull, no doubt. Perez was really struggling in FP1 and in fairness FP2 as well, but the main kind of downside of this session for the Red Bulls was Max Verstappen. He actually did about 7 or so laps on the hard tyre and immediately had to pull over with a gearbox issue. His gearbox gave up the ghost. I think he was shifting from 4th up to 5th, and it just decided enough was enough. I think they were even fiddling around with his gearbox before the session began, so they must have known that it wasn't all perfect. And he has to wave to the crowd and walk off, right? So he joins Hamilton on the Boulevard of Broken Dreams last weekend. But of course, different story here for Verstappen. This is early on in the weekends, and of course, there's plenty of racing and plenty of track action still to come over the rest of it for Verstappen to try and win his home Grand Prix. But it's not exactly going in their favour so far. And of course, this gearbox issue could be a massive deal. As it turns out, more than likely, this was effectively like a practice gearbox. Often the teams will use a different gearbox in Friday practice than they will for the rest of the weekends. And as Horner kind of says, hopefully they can get it turned around quickly for the next session. So I don't believe there'll be any penalties penalties associated with this, but down the line it might not be great if this gearbox is just broken. Like, they might have to take a penalty as a result of this, not at this weekend, but at future weekends. So yes, he stopped, something went wrong with the gearbox, had to kind of wave to the fans as his car was towed away. So not an ideal start, and of course especially so because not getting the running here in FP1 means that for FP2 they did not get the answers that they wanted from the first practice session. They couldn't translate any of that into pace in FP2, and therefore they've got to really try and figure out what to change overnight here from just one practice session, which is far from easy, especially considering the fact that last weekends they turned up to quali or turned up to practice. Verstappen was immediately topping the timesheets and did the same for the entire weekend. So Verstappen found the sweet spot and Red Bull did straight away last time out in Spa, and maybe Mercedes have done that this time out, because I don't think there's definitely not been a session so far this year on a Friday, at least FP1 session, where Mercedes have topped it. Certainly not a 1-2. So it was a 1-2 for Mercedes, Russell and Hamilton in FP1, Sainz right behind them, and these were kind of the numbers. So Russell was leading things up, Hamilton about a quarter of a second behind, and then these other numbers. But yeah, Perez about a second off the pace. I don't think he got a great lap in, but still far from optimal in that Red Bull. Verstappen, of course, still managed to beat Latifi, even though he was on the hard. So yeah, Latifi in a league of his own. But then FP2, Red Bull were P5 and P16 respectively. Verstappen went top of the timesheet early on, but then was quite quickly overhauled, and Perez was really struggling out there pretty much all across the board. And FP2 ends up with a Ferrari 1-2, just at 4 thousandths of a second separating Leclerc and Sainz, a track where you would feel like this, well, favours them massively. And then Hamilton less than a tenth of a second down in P3. So honestly, pretty impressive stuff I thought from Mercedes today. Ferrari looking good as expected, but I mean, yeah, Mercedes are usually terrible on Friday. They seem to have got things right today for pretty much the first time this season. They occasionally, very occasionally, look good in FP2, but it's few and far between. So today was probably the best day they've had on a Friday this entire season. Their quali pace, of course, hasn't been great this year, but of course they got pole back in Hungary, a circuit which is probably rather comparable to this one. High downforce, lots of corners. Like, it should be a good one for Mercedes given their strengths a few weeks ago back in Budapest. So maybe another pole position here is on the cards, and even if it's not, the Ferraris, their race pace, their tyre degradation has not been great lately. The Mercedes have been quicker than them, like at, well, the majority, you could even argue, of some of the most recent races in terms of race pace. And the long run pace, I think, is actually looking really good for the Mercedes in these kind of practice sessions today. So if that's anything to go by, Mercedes could be in with a real chance this weekend if and only if Red Bull stay off the pace. If Red Bull all of a sudden join them up top, it seems difficult to look past Verstappen, but that's far from guaranteed at the moment given the pace deficit they had. Red Bull were losing about 4 tenths of a second in sector 1 to the McLaren. Definitely wanted to point out that McLaren and Lando Norris put in some absolute blinders and actually had arguably the second fastest lap in terms of an ideal lap if you add up the best sectors that Norris had on the day. So that bodes incredibly well. And also Lance Stroll was right up there as well. So it seems really competitive at the top of the timesheet right now, but Red Bull not joining them as of yet. Wanted to share a few words here from Hamilton, a rare smile from him after a Friday session, and Russell as well, much more confident in their car this weekend. Hamilton reckons there's not too much more to come in terms of performance, but in terms of their race pace already, they believe there's a lot of confidence when it comes to qualifying in the race.
Lewis, P2 and a P3 today. Safe to say a bit better than Spa last weekend, but how would you rate your Friday?
This is a lot better than my Sunday, and it's a lot better than Friday, even last week. And so yeah, it's been a decent start to the weekend. We've landed in a much sweeter spot with the car, just being that it's a much different track. And yeah, it's a work in progress. We're not that far behind, which is great to see, and the car doesn't feel that bad. So we just got to keep chipping away. There's probably not a huge amount more performance-wise, but we keep pushing.
Well, George, P1 and a P5 today. How would you rate your Friday, especially after a difficult weekend last time out?
Better than Spa, I think that's for sure, comparing with this time last week. But yeah, the car's working better. There's no doubt about it. It's going to be close tomorrow. I think McLaren are looking quick, even Aston Martin, and we still know qualifying is our weak point. I think the race will come towards us, and I think our long run pace is looking strong. But you've got to be starting in the right position. If we're starting on row 3, it's going to be difficult to battle for first or second. But it was a little bit tricky out there because the timing screens wasn't working, so we didn't have. I don't know if that was the same on the television or not.
Yes, there's been some issues.
Okay, so yeah, it's not just us then. So we couldn't really actually see where our long run pace is really at. So I'm sure everyone's going to dive into it tonight and try gather as much data as possible. But I think we're in a relatively good spot.
Verstappen, of course, was not so happy with his weekend so far, but, I mean, yeah, difficult Friday for him and the Red Bull team. The issue in FP1 really didn't help because they couldn't get the setup where they wanted it. But we have seen so far this season, when Red Bull struggle early on, it's not guaranteed that tomorrow morning for FP3 they turn up and have a car that can put it on the front row, put it on pole position. They, of course, the other teams got all the data, all the knowledge from FP1, FP2. Red Bull kind of don't quite have that. They might have to take some estimated guesses overnight to try and put themselves in position. But Verstappen's confident they will have more to come here, Red Bull, which of course they do. The car looked a bit of a nightmare, to be honest, but it's not guaranteed it'll be in position to even, get on the front row. Who knows? Of course, they could turn it around and have a massive result tomorrow, but we could be in for a really interesting state of affairs. Christian Horner even reckons before the weekend began that, a similar layout to Budapest, Mercedes could come back into the fray, and if they can compete for first, second row when it comes to tomorrow, then in terms of race pace, there's a real chance there, right? Because should be harder to overtake around Zandvoort for sure than it would have been around Spa. So if Verstappen does start on, third row or something, or even further back, who knows if he has further issues, then he's not exactly going to be blasting his way through 7-8 positions in just a few laps, right? That seems, maybe he can, but it seems less likely, of course, that the Dutch crowd will be roaring him on. There was also some talk about our drivers impeding others. Vettel, Hamilton was certainly a note. They got someone to the stewards, but just got a reprimand effectively for causing, maybe they didn't even get a reprimand, I don't know. No further action, I suppose, has been stated here. But I think Hamilton was having issues with his radio and stuff, so his engineers were trying to tell him, there's someone coming up behind you, and you're like, you can't see anything in these cars. So he was kind of none the wiser, so maybe they can fix that one for the rest of the weekend. But that is going to do it for today. Very much intrigued to your thoughts on all this in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you are new, take care, and I will see you next time.